Halo teman-teman semua, selamat malam. Selamat datang di Flutter Talk Indonesia sekarang dengan AWS. Nah, di malam ini teman-teman kita bakal membicarain tentang AWS Amplify nih. Banyak banget yang kita bicarain, ada 2 sesi hari ini di Flutter Talk Indonesia X AWS malam ini yang akan membahas tentang Amplify, gimana cara kita menggunakan Amplify di Flutter. Dan I think I will try to mix between Indonesia and English. To be honest, I'm not sure if there's any English speaking audience in between us. If there is, welcome to Flutter Indonesia talk. So like pre-COVID, we actually have been gathering an event in person or online, probably like once a month, once every 2 months or something like that. And then because of COVID, we didn't do like much of those activities anymore. But we're trying. This is one of them. Hopefully, you will be enjoying like this interaction between us, like developers, asking questions, like getting to know each other, getting to know like more technologies probably that we haven't been get to know before. Boleh absen dong teman-teman. Dari mana mungkin? Apakah dari Indonesia, dari Jakarta, atau dari luar kota? Kayak gitu biar kita bisa saling tahu lah dari mana nih kebanyakan audiensnya, kayak gitu. Terus buat teman-teman yang ada di sini, jangan lupa nanya ya. Jadi nanti kita ada 2 sesi. Sesi pertama itu by Derek Bingham, developer advocate untuk AWS. Dia akan ngebahas tentang AWS Amplify, gimana cara menggunakannya di Flutter untuk membuat aplikasi yang offline first gitu. Jelasnya gimana nanti kita bakal tanyain dengan Derek. Sesinya akan dilaksanakan dalam English, jadi bukan Indonesia teman-teman. Jadi kalau emang nanti ada pertanyaan, boleh ditanyain di kolom live chatnya YouTube aja. 2 penanya yang beruntung untuk sesi pertamanya Derek Bingham itu akan dapat credits AWS, teman-teman, senilai $25. Jadi harus fokus ya, tanya nanti di akhir sesinya kalau emang ada pertanyaan tentang AWS, Amplify terutama, atau AWS in general juga boleh ditanyain. Ditanyain aja via live chat. Habis itu di sesi kedua nanti ada saya yang akan ngebahas menggunakan bahasa, jadi versi translate-nya gitu ya. Akan ngebahas tentang menggunakan AWS Amplify di Flutter, apa kelebihannya, apa kekurangannya, kayak gitu. Saya kebetulan belum pernah pakai juga di production, jadi baru sambil coba-coba ini pakai AWS Amplify di Flutter. Kita pengen tahu lah biar bisa compare, gimana, apa kelebihannya, apa kekurangannya, kayak gitu. Oke, bentar, boleh kita tunggu sedikit lagi kali ya, karena teman-temannya agak banyak yang join. Oke, sebentar. Oke, kita langsung invite aja Derek ke streamnya. Hello Derek, how are you?
Hi, Angga. Thank you. I'm well. And thanks for having me at your
Yeah.
awesome user group.
Definitely. There there's a audience in the live chat. No, the first session would be on English by Derek. So don't worry, you will be, having everything in English. So if you don't speak any Indonesian, you can actually like enjoy the session as well. No worries. Okay, back to you, Derek. Okay, so what would you be like talking in the session tonight?
Yeah, thanks, Angga. So this session, I'm going to go through how to build an offline first application using Flutter and
Okay.
Amplify. So I'm just going to go through an application from start to finish and how I would think about building it and designing it. And I'll go through some patterns, and I'll also go through different parts of the Amplify library that we
Okay.
can use to enhance our application.
Okay. Okay. That is very awesome. I'm definitely looking forward to the presentation. Okay. So without any further ado, let me bring your presentation and then over to you, Derek. Good luck.
Great. Thanks, Angga. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Building Offline First with Flutter and AWS Amplify. As Angga mentioned, my name is Derek Bingham. I am a developer advocate at AWS. There's my Twitter handle. If you want to connect, please feel free. And that's the best place to reach me if you've got questions in the future about building on AWS. So let's start with a bit about me. To introduce myself in a way. So I've spent the last 20 years as a software developer, building lots of different applications using a number of different technologies. Over the last 7 to 8 years, I've probably focused on mobile and front-end development the most. And in doing so, I've used a lot of cloud native backend services. And I always found it was complex to connect mobile and web front ends into cloud services. And what I was really looking for is a way to abstract those difficulties and those complexities. And that's where Amplify comes in. So I'll explain about that later. I've spent the last 4 years at AWS in various roles. I've been a developer advocate for about 2 of those 4 years. I'm actually, although I'm living in Australia, I'm actually from Ireland, and I've lived in Australia for a number of years. You can also reach me at LinkedIn if that's your preferred method, and that's my handle in LinkedIn as well. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about tech. So to start the presentation, I want to just dive into what we mean by offline first, because we hear a lot of it. Just let's see what it is. So when we think about offline first, we think about building an application that must always be available. All of the functionality of the application must be available even if the device is connected in a connected or disconnected state. So that data that's on the device for the application must always be available. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the underlying data model needs to take into account things like conflict detection and resolution, because obviously when you're using the device and it's disconnected, you can still change that data in the device. And then when it becomes connected again, it needs to sync that data to its back end, but also if there's any conflicts in that data, it needs to resolve them. So that's the complexity of an offline first app. But also the device and the application itself needs to hold state. So it needs to hold the state of whether it's online or offline and perform various computations and tasks accordingly. So again, a complexity of building an application offline first. So how do we usually fix that? There we go. Well, usually we write lots and lots of code. Lots of code. So we have to write code that thinks about its connection state of the device, how to do things like conflict detection and resolution. Usually a lot of boilerplate or scaffold code, and it just slows the application development cycle down, because what we need these days is our applications to hit the stores as quickly as possible, because there's a lot of competition. Everybody's building an app. I'm sure everybody listening here at the minute is building an app. And so writing this code, this additional code, is an overhead that we really could do without. So ideally, if we were building an offline first application, we would like the connection state to be handled for us, so to be abstracted away. We'd also like that conflict and detection and resolution complexity managed for us as well, so we didn't have to think about that. We would also not really want to do all of the repetitive scaffolding code that applications usually have to have inside them. And what that would do, that would leave maximum time to build the features of the application. So the real value add, the distinguishing parts of the application from all the other applications out there. So today I'm going to show you how you can do that using AWS Amplify. And I'll show you by building an app myself with it offline first. But first, before I jump into the code, let's have a think about what is AWS Amplify. So this is one slide in the whole application that I'll show you about Amplify. So Amplify is a set of tools and services that you can use to build front-end and mobile applications with an AWS backend. What it does, it abstracts the complexities of the AWS services away from the developer. So developers who do not know what S3 is, or do not know what an API gateway is, can still develop applications, because the complexity of S3, these are two services, S3 or API gateway, which are AWS services, you don't really need to know about them, but you can still develop your app. And it does that by providing a number of tools. So on the left-hand side, we can see the AWS CLI. So the AWS Amplify CLI is the way that you provision the Amplify backend services. It has the AWS Amplify Studio, which we'll see today, which is a way of visualizing all of those backend services through a single pane of glass. So a website that describes all of those backend services that you're using for your application. And then finally, it's got a bunch of Amplify libraries. So all of the Amplify libraries are open source, and you can access them on GitHub. Now, Amplify, although this is a Flutter talk today, Amplify, as well as Flutter, comes in React flavor, comes in a number of different front-end frameworks that you may use as well. And so it doesn't just come for Flutter. In saying that, on the right-hand side is the number of feature categories. So feature categories are the behaviors and the functionality that Amplify can provide for your application. So notice here I've got 12 feature categories, but only 5 of them are highlighted in orange. So those 5 are the 5 that are currently supported by Flutter. Now, if I was talking about, say, a React application, you might get a bit more of those feature categories highlighted. And if I was talking about a native Android application, you might get a few less. So depending on the frameworks and the libraries that Amplify uses and the platforms that the application is running on, depends on what feature categories you can get. And this is all in the Amplify documentation. So that is Amplify in a nutshell. And today I'm going to use some of those feature categories to add functionality to the application. So what application am I going to build tonight? So I'm going to build what I call the humble shopping list. So this is an application that I will build that will enable the sharing of a shopping list. So say the use case would be that you need to combine a list of items that you and your housemates all need together so that you can go shopping. And you don't have to go shopping together. You can parallelize the act of shopping. So some of your housemates could get a couple of the items, others could get others. But at the end of the day, they'll all satisfy the entire shopping list. So I'm going to build 3 screens for this. The display list, which displays the list of shopping items, the add item dialog, which will enable anyone to add an item, and the buy item action, which enable you to check off an item as you buy it. Now, if you think about this application in an offline first paradigm, the application can be used connected and disconnected. So, and still receive the same result. As well as that functionality, I'm going to add a shopper profile to the application. So the shopper profile is part of the application, and it enables you to see who is currently logged in and have a picture of your face or avatar and all your details. So that's the second page that I will show you later on in the demo. So that's my application, a list of shopping items and the profile of the shopper. If you want to have a look at the source code, so this is the application I built for DroidCon at the end of last year. So all of the demo and how I demonstrate it will all be on Android, but it's Flutter, so it can easily work on iOS as well, if you so desire. But the code is all there. So let's start with having a look at the basic UI that I've built. So here I've got my development environment. I've got VS Code on the left-hand side. That's how I choose to develop things. You can use your usual mobile development setup or a Flutter development setup. And on the right-hand side, I've got an Android emulator. So the first thing you can see, it's in my main, I've got a shopping app, and I'm just simply setting the theme to green because I'm from Ireland. I like green. And there's the main view that I'm going to sketch out today. So it's a stateful widget, and I will define the state for this stateful widget. I'm going to assume that there's some knowledge of Flutter already in the audience. And so in the build method, I've got a scaffold of an app bar and a floating action button. So if I just define those, first of all, the nav bar at the top, which is simply the title, my shopping list. The next thing I'll need to define is the floating action button. And in this floating action button, when you hit it, it'll show a modal button sheet, and then it'll display the new item view. So the new item view itself is a simple text field that has a title, and it'll say enter groceries here, and the on pressed event will do nothing yet because it's just UI we're concentrating on here. So that's a very simple UI. We F5 this and to run it across into the emulator. You'll see that it looks exactly like it should, as I showed you in the earlier PowerPoint, with the actions all wired in. So we'll just wait for this to deploy. So there we are. We've got our widgets as expected, and if we hit the floating action button, then we should get a modal popping up, and we should be able to then enter some text. And yep, if we hit the button, obviously we haven't wired up the on pressed event. So that's the very simple UI. So it gives you some context of what we're trying to build. So that's the next stage would be to try and think about how we're going to wire up the on pressed event, i.e. what data do we need to store on the device. Remember, this is an offline first approach, so we are building this application just like it would be offline. So let's start adding our first feature category so we can add offline persistence. So here we are back at the Amplify slide. And the actual feature category we need to add to ensure we have persistence is data store. So data store is the feature category I'm going to add now from Amplify into my Flutter application. What data store does, data store is a way of providing a very simple API that abstracts the complexities of storing any data on the device. It works on a local data store. So if you're running data store on an iOS or Android, it will store it into the local database, and it doesn't require a backend connection. So even though this is an AWS service, no AWS connection is required for it to work. So let's go about seeing how we model that data that we need to persist. And we do this using the Amplify sandbox. So this is a website you can go to. You do not require an AWS account. Sandbox the Amplify app. You hit getting started. And here we want to build a data model. So I'm not going to use any of the templates. I'm going to build a blank schema. And in here, I can add models. So I've got a obvious model from an application, which is shopping list item, I'll call it. And inside the shopping list item, I will add some fields. So I have the item name, which is a string and is required. So it's mandatory. I'll also have is completed. So that's my checkbox. This needs to be obviously a Boolean because it's true or false. And the next model I want to add is the profile model. So remember, my shopping list item, my shopping list, as well as my profile are the two screens I'm going to build tonight. So the profile model there's a bit more to it, more fields. So it'll be a username, it'll be a string, it'll be mandatory as well. We have an email, which is also a string, but not mandatory. And then we also have an image key because we want to store the image of the person, of the profile, and a short description of who you are. So once you've built that model here using Amplify, you can then go through steps that will pull it into your application. So Amplify will guide you through this. So we're choosing cross-platform and Flutter. We hit next. It then gives you steps on how to set up your project to run Flutter, but we all know that already. So the next step is to install the Amplify CLI. So what you do, you copy and paste these commands into your project. Once you've pasted those commands in, it then goes through and it shows you the steps that you need to do to add the dependencies for Amplify, how to initialize Amplify in every platform, so iOS and Android, and then how to configure Amplify for first use. And then it also goes through steps on how to use the CRUD operations for the data store API. So I'm going to go through all those steps now. So the first thing we need to do is pull down that data model. So what this does, it pulls down the data model and generates code. So it generates the data models in code. So what it does, it'll create a models folder. If you see that on the left, and inside there is generated all the model code that you can interact with. Next, I'm going to change pubspec.yaml and inject all of the Amplify dependencies. So what I'm really doing here is copying and pasting it from the web console you've seen before. So just tidy that up a bit and just go through these steps. Once pubget is finished, I'll continue on. Here we just, again, going through the steps that the Amplify console told us to do, which was change the build of Gradle and give it a minimum version. Once we've set the min version to 21, If we were doing an iOS device as well, we could change that as well, but we're just concentrating on Android for this demo. Then we can introspect the models folder and see all of the code that Amplify has generated for us. So this is all accessors and mutators for our models that were created, all generated for us. So it saved us a heap of time. And then inside main.dart itself, we need to configure Amplify. So get it set up for first use. Now we do that by, again, just copy and pasting the configure Amplify method that was in the Amplify console you saw previous. We'll import the dependencies. So Amplify libraries are recognized inside main.dart. And then we'll have to do an override of the init state method so we can call the init amplify method. Or the configure amplify method. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm also defining a amplify configured bool. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to configure amplify more than once. So I need to just hold on to that as a piece of state. So that's amplify configured. Now, just a refresher, where did I get all of that from? Well, I got it all from here. So I copied all of those commands across from here into my project. Next, I need to start mutating and changing the data model with data. So Amplify provides me with all of these commands that are API calls that I can use to do create, update, delete, and query. So I can copy these commands across and put them into my project. Now, what I want to do is wrap those commands in a repository pattern. So I'm now defining a shopping list repository. Now, why I'm doing this? Well, it's good practice. If you're building offline first applications, you want to abstract the underlying data layer or how you access the underlying data layer away from the UI as much as possible. And so you define a repository to do that. So if you decide to change the implementation of how you actually store data, you only have to change that implementation in the repository and nowhere else in the application. So inside the repository itself, I will define methods for get list items, create list items, and update list items. If you haven't used a repository pattern before, there's lots of documentation on the internet about it. I highly recommend you have a look at it. It really makes writing offline first applications a lot easier. So the last method I'm defining is the observer. So I can observe the stream of data as it's changed inside the application. And so that's what the observe method will do. So once I've written the method signatures, I can then copy and paste the actual implementation from the Amplify. So it gives me some code that obviously is not right. I just need to change it to fit my application. So I can change it to actually update the item that's passed in. And I can do that for all of these. So next, after building my repository, I'm now going to implement a block pattern. So at the minute, we've got our UI, got a repository, but we need to combine the two. And the best way I found, and what I use a lot when I'm building Flutter applications, is the block pattern. So now I'm defining the qubit, which will be the shopping list item. And if you haven't used the block pattern before, this may not be familiar. If you have, this will be very familiar, where you actually define similar methods in the repository. I'm just now defining the dependencies for the block pattern, Flutter block, which is the implementation I'm using. And inside here, I will define, again, methods that will allow me to get, create, update list items. And these methods will simply be delegating calls down to the repository that I defined before. And as you can see, I'm leveraging the shopping list repo. The last one, the observe, I'll just explain that a bit if because we're actually acting on the stream. So the stream of data I'm going to observe is actually, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to say register for all events on the stream. And once any event is invoked, I will just refresh the list. So get list items. Once I have defined my block, qubit, I can then wrap my view in that, which I'm doing now. And then define the methods I'm interested in. Which is get and observe items. So, and then the child, I'm going to say if the Amplify configured boolean is false, I want is true. So Amplify is being configured, show the list items view. Otherwise, I'll define a loading view, so a wheel of loading until Amplify is configured. Hope that all makes sense. It's a fairly standard pattern to control the loading of an application. So that's my application starting to flesh out how to store my data model. I've built my data model. I've pulled it down, so all of the code has been generated for that model, and then I've started to interact with the model using Data Store API through a repository and block patterns. So if you haven't come across the block pattern before, it's just a way, it's a nice little representation of how I'm using it. So if you look at the bottom, it's a method from my repository. So I explained earlier, I'm using the repository pattern as a way of abstracting how I actually store data. In this case, I'm using Amplify Data Store to do that. And then above that, we have the block pattern, which is a way of tying events that happen inside my UI to calls into my repository pattern. And then at the top, obviously, I've got my UI. So it's a nice way of abstracting those out. Abstractions like this are key when building offline first apps, because you can change components in and out and implementations in and out a lot easier than if you combine them all together. So now I have that code, I need to test it so I make sure it works offline. So testing locally, and then once I'm happy with it running in an offline manner, I then need to start thinking about the backend or the online scenario. So here we are back in my application. So as you can see, my on-pressed event has been defined. And what it'll do, it'll create a list item using my block. And then I've also defined an empty list view, which says your shopping list is empty. It's for convenience and so the user is not confused. So if I F5, if I run this application, you'll see that my list is empty. If I add items, then I can add an item like cheese. And there is an item called cheese, and my the is shopped works as well. So that is storing all of that information locally, and it works really well. The next thing I need to do is I've got the offline bit done. I need to do the backend, and I do this by hitting the deploy database button. I can create a new account or use an existing account. So I'm using an existing AWS account to deploy this to. Checking the questions in the chat. So once you go into the AWS account, it will prompt you to give the backend a name. So this is my shopping list application, and it will tell you what services that Amplify has created. So in this case, it's AppSync, a GraphQL service, and Amazon DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL database. Before we didn't know about that because Amplify was abstracting all of that complexity away. Once it's deployed, so this is what's happening now, we have the Amplify console, so the Amplify admin UI. And in here, we have a single pane of glass over everything that Amplify creates for us. So I told you about abstractions. So this is how we abstract those services away. Now, if I copy the pull command, what this now does is pulls those backend services into my local application so I could start interacting with them. So it prompts me for a few things that I need to set up in my application so that the development environment is aware now of the backend that we've just configured and deployed. So once that's done, we have a backend for our application. And that is pretty much it. So you don't have to change any more code for the application to start working. But I'll explain how that happens. So data store, as well as the disconnected flow that I showed earlier, so the offline flow, it also has a connected flow. So once it detects that a backend environment exists for the application, it does a number of things. It employs a sync engine, and the sync engine uses GraphQL to generate the queries and mutations that are required to update the data in the backend. So if you add an item from the device, it will push that item through your data model to the sync engine. Sync engine will go, oh, there's a new item, let's push that to the backend. The backend will call GraphQL a mutation, and then that will create the item in the DynamoDB database. GraphQL subscription will be then fired, and then the item that you've created on your device will appear in everybody else's device who's running the application. So that's how the sync engine works. So it's really nice, a way of having the online or connected state functioning without having to write any additional code. As well as that, it also employs conflict detection and resolution. So remember at the start, I talked about the complexities around offline first applications. First one was connection state, which the previous slide showed that data store was solving for us. The second one, conflict detection resolution, it's a lot more complex. So when you build and when you deploy the backend service for data store, you will get a default strategy of conflict detection and resolution, which is called auto merge. It will define how it merges different data types. So here, scalars, lists, sets, and maps all will be merged depending on those rules that are defined here. So scalars will always be server-side preferred. Lists will concatenate the two and append. So if you've got lists that are two lists from two different devices, as they merge, you will potentially get duplicates. You get sets, which will union the two, and maps, which will apply rules depending on the property. You can also set the conflict detection strategy to optimistic concurrency. So any update is default reject, or you can write your own. So if you have a particular conflict detection resolution strategy that you want to use, you can write it yourself. So let's see how that works and rerun our application. So now we're running our application. We haven't added any additional code. And so we've got the application with an empty list. So what we can actually do is go into our Amplify Studio backend and create some content for this application. So we're simulating here another device being connected or just another application pushing data to our application's backend. So here's the data. That's the data model that we created earlier. And we can add additional items here. So let's add one. So let's add an item name of the usual that I use in all my demos, cheese. And then see it appears in the device on the right hand side. And then if I add what goes with cheese is crackers. So I can add crackers, and you can see on the device on the right hand side, crackers appears as well. I can also change values in that field. So I can set the is complete flag, and you can see that gets sent to the device as well. So you can see that the back end, front end connection state is working really well as well. So now I'm also going to show you how it works between devices. So I'm going to find another device emulator to run. And in this case, I'm going to spin up another Android emulator. Once that's running, take a little bit. We can put them side by side so you can see them. So there's our crackers and cheese that we added. So this simulates, two housemates having the shopping list. Okay, and they're even aligned a different way. So if I add another item to the list in device 1, you can see it pops up in device 2. If I go to the shops and buy that milk, it'll flag it in device 1. So again, it's a nice syncing, so we can parallelize the act of shopping. So that's satisfied the first requirement of my application. It'll work offline and online, and when it comes online, it'll conflict detect and resolve any of the data model. So that's how you use data store Amplify to build offline first apps. So as well as data store, we also have other features and other feature categories you can use with Amplify. And I'm going to use this for the profile page. So the profile page is that. So you change the photograph and then upload your profile. So for this, I'm going to use the storage feature category and analytics feature category. So here we are back inside my application. So if you look inside, again, I've followed the same pattern where I have a repository for my profile, and this time the repository will be images. So I'll need a storage repository. And the UI itself is just an app bar and a profile page. App bar is nothing special there. A profile page is an avatar, a title, email, and description. And it looks a bit like this, which is exactly what the PowerPoint looked like. It's got a profile picture as well. And if we look inside main.dart, I've added the storage plugin, which is the feature category for Amplify that we're going to use. And I've also added it to the pubspec.yaml. And there it is, storage. So once again, this is my block pattern for my this page, and it's got the storage repository in there. And if you have a look at that, I've got two methods in here. I've got upload file, which is using Amplify, the storage feature category. And I've got get URL for file. So this way, anybody, if you log into the application, you'll get the same images. It's fairly standard for a user profile. So now if I hit change, I can push up the gallery and I can change a new image for my profile. The image will appear in the application, but it'll also get stored in the back end as well when we're connected. And then I have also added analytics. So I've added analytics into the same way. So pubspec.yaml, you'll see a common pattern emerging here when you want to use different feature categories. And if I use the Amplify CLI to go status, it'll show you all the feature categories you've got: API, auth, stories, and analytics. And that way you can just monitor what backend you have. You go back to the list, and so that's my application workings. But let's see what the single pane of glass shows us for those different services that we've added. The first one is the storage feature category. So the storage feature category is actually wrapped Amazon S3. And we can look at the actual files that are being stored in Amazon S3. We don't need to know about the service when we're building the application, but if we want to dig in deeper into the services that were created, we can. So storage will build an Amazon S3 bucket. And here we're having a look at the GraphQL API using AWS AppSync, which is our managed GraphQL service. As you can see, it's got the data model that we created. We didn't have to build any of that. We didn't have to, it was all generated for us. It also defines the shopping list. So the two tables that we've got, so we've got a shopping list item table. This is DynamoDB, which is our NoSQL database store. And in here, we've got all of the shopping list items that I created. Again, didn't need to know much about this because Amplify created it for us and abstracted away its complexity. And here's the same thing for user profile. So all of the details of each user and their profiles are all stored inside DynamoDB. And then finally, some analytics. So I added analytics into every time a user adds a new shopping list item. So the underlying store service is called Pinpoint, and it'll show you all the analytics that you want inside that. You can also view the content, as I've seen that before. So it will show you all of the items that are in your shopping list. And you can also add authentication and authorization. So this is the user who has access currently to the application. And that's it. That's my application. I've built it using the different feature categories of Amplify. I've started offline first. I created the list. I then connected it to the back end. Data store synced that list. I then added additional features like storage, authentication, authorization, and analytics. So what were the next steps? So you can have a look at the code if you want on my GitHub repo. There's also the GitHub repo for Amplify Flutter. Amplify Flutter has been around for 18 months now. And if you look at it, it's maintained and the people are adding PRs and issues all the time. And also I have a blog which goes into a bit more detail about how I built this particular app. So that link is the first one in this series. So that's it. Thanks for listening. I'll take any questions that you have right now. Again, reach out on Twitter and I'll answer them offline as well.
Thank you, Derek. What an awesome presentation. So yeah, I think me myself also have already tried like AWS Amplify. I haven't tried it out before, and then my first impression was it was like really easy to start, especially with the CLI and everything. I think like even for someone who hasn't like code at all, probably can actually start with the Amplify CLI, especially. So thank you for the presentation.
No problem.
Next, we have the question session. So everyone, if you have any question, feel free to just join in the live chat, YouTube live chat, and then after that, we'll bring it up, and then Derek will answer your question. Okay, so we have one question from Fahron on Asutra. So the question is, what config is used so that our code can connect with Amplify? Like Firebase is there is a service that just JSON. What about Amplify? Is there any like similar file?
Exactly the same. It's amplify config.json. It's exactly the same concept where it has the list of backend services and their URLs, and obviously that's a file that you never check in source code, but is there inside your project.
Okay. Thank you, Mas Fahron, for the question. If anyone have any question, feel free to ask in the YouTube live chat. In the meantime, I will ask question that I have prepared. First question, is Amplify has been used in production already by companies worldwide?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two use cases that I like to talk about, if you remember when I went into the Amplify web console for the first time, there's a whole list of companies that are using it. So if you go into the sandbox.amplify.com, you'll see a few. I'll just touch on two that I know of. The first one is called Orange Theory Fitness, which was an application, a company in the US who, when everybody went remote, had no way of servicing their customers. So what they did, they used Amplify to change their existing application so that it could start streaming videos and training videos and fitness videos to their customers. And they turned that around extremely quickly using Amplify. The other one that springs to mind as well is in the UK. So we have I think it was a Virgin Train, so a large train train provider, so train commute, that sort of thing. They used Amplify more for the app sync side to notify people of timetable changes, how things have changed. So they used that, and that scaled up beautifully for them. So they're two that spring to mind. It's definitely being used a lot in worldwide at the minute.
Cool. Yeah, good to know. Because that's probably like the one question that I got the most from developers, right? They are actually like very skeptical about these things. If we have like one magic tools that help us, don't code at all. Yeah, usually that's the question.
I think also
Okay.
Angga, it's
Yeah.
the if you use something like Amazon Music, which is an application
Mm-hmm.
to run Amazon Music, that's all built in Amplify as well.
Yeah.
So we use it internally to build our
Oh,
own
that's cool.
applications. Well, Amazon use it.
Okay, that is very cool. That is very cool. Okay. Next question I have. Can I combine the usage of Amplify with my own backend? Say I already have a system that is quite mature. I have already maintained it for let's say a couple of months until years. Can I just combine it and then just put Amplify beside my system?
Hmm. So we recently, at the end of last year, we enabled the ability to export an Amplify project as CDK. So CDK is our cloud development kit, and it allows you to actually provision the services, any services that are in AWS. And so what you can, if you've got an existing application that is defined using the CDK and runs on AWS, and it's quite it's well used and it's been around for a while, you can bring Amplify, export it into that application, and that will work. You can also add Amplify to an existing CI/CD pipeline. So what we're seeing is enterprises have an existing CI/CD pipeline, maybe code pipeline in AWS. You can bring Amplify in so that it will be part of that pipeline and deploy with your application. So that's something that users have been asking for a long time, and we delivered that at the end of last year.
We have another question from the audience. The question is it accessing a database from Amplify is same as an API? Probably like a REST API, if you would say.
Yeah, so as I talked before, Amplify is a way of abstracting the backend services. So the feature category using feature categories. So the feature category that abstracts APIs is called API, and it actually abstracts two types of API. So you can abstract a RESTful API or a GraphQL API. So the way you do that is when you inside your application using the Amplify CLI, you go Amplify add API. So that will then prompt you to specify which type of API. So if you specify RESTful, it will provision a API gateway RESTful service for you. If you specify GraphQL, it will provision a AWS AppSync GraphQL service for you. So that's how it all works.
Okay, we have another question from Mas Joshua Situmorang. How about traffic distribution in Amplify AWS? Can we distribute load balancers between like these services?
Yeah, we recently released a bunch of white papers about how to go about doing globally distributed Amplify backends. And so using CDNs to actually distribute based on geo. And that's a cool white paper. If you look at there's an AWS mobile blog that goes into a lot of detail into what services are there to enable that. So that's worth looking at if you want to think about load distribution and geo across geos in particular, as well as any distribution of load. The load balancer itself. So if you amplify a load balancer, I'll just talk in specifics. So the load balancer is not part of a abstraction. So Amplify won't abstract the load because what it does, it provisions serverless services. So serverless services will expand based on the load anyway. So there's no need for load balancers in Amplify. However, as we talked about before, if you have an existing application that uses load balancers, you can start thinking about how to plug the Amplify end of that project into it.
Okay, thank you for the question and the answer as well. Okay, if anyone has any question, we still have time. In the meantime, I will ask another question that we have prepared. One second. Also, the pricing was also like one of the most frequent question that people ask while coming into this topic. So how will Amplify does actually like charge us developers for the services that we use?
So as I mentioned at the start, the Amplify libraries themselves are open source, so they are free. Using Amplify is free. So building your applications using those libraries, it's free. What you'll pay for is the actual services that are provisioned. So we talked about earlier about APIs. So if you use the API Amplify feature category and choose REST, then you will create an API gateway. You will pay for that API gateway that it creates, and the price, all the pricing for API gateway, I'm just using that as an example, is on the API gateway pricing page. So the actual using Amplify to create it was free. You'll pay for the API gateway as users use it.
Okay, thank you. Last question from me would be, so there's a lot of features on the AWS Amplify, like you just demoed to us. What is like one of your most favorite feature on the AWS Amplify that you have been using?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to talk about a feature that's currently not available in Flutter, in the Flutter library. So I mentioned again at the start how different platforms and frameworks you can have access to different feature categories. In React and React Native, you have access to the AI ML feature category. So that's cool. I like using that because it gives you stuff like image recognition, um, uh, auto text recognition, all of the features, some of the AI ML features that and services that are available on AWS, and it's really easy to implement. So it's very powerful, because if you think about trying to implement those high-end AI ML features in an application, it could take you a long time. So I like that the best.
Yeah, AI ML is definitely like one of the most interesting part of like modern programming. Okay, so I think that's all the questions. So thank you so much, Derek, for your time.
Thank you for having
We
me.
hope to see you again in the future. And then, yeah, we really hope that like your talk about AWS Amplify will encourage more developers to use AWS Amplify, at least to explore like what kind of usage that we can do on it. And then after that, at least like try to sign up on AWS and then, yeah, try it on Flutter as well. Okay, so
Yeah.
thank you so much, Derek. Have a great
Thank
one.
you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Oke, teman-teman, berikut udah selesai ya talk dari Derek. Selanjutnya kita ada talk sedikit dari saya, nggak terlalu panjang. Jadi tadi Derek udah ngebahas tentang AWS Amplify, gimana cara menggunakannya di Flutter. Habis itu use case lain kayak AI sama ML juga udah dikasih tahu sama Derek tadi dalam bahasa Inggris. Sekarang saya pengen lanjut dengan versi bahasa Indonesianya. Karena biasanya kalau kita ada talk di bahasa Inggris, ada beberapa audiens yang mungkin speakernya ngomongnya terlalu cepat atau kayak gimana. Jadi kita coba bahas sedikit di bahasa Indonesia juga ya. Kita langsung lanjut aja. Oke, kita langsung lanjut aja cut to the chase. Jadi hari ini saya mau ngebahas dengan bahasa Indonesia tentang menggunakan AWS Amplify di Flutter, kayak gitu. Jadi saya di sini Angga Arifandi, GDE Flutter, terus saya sekarang bekerja sebagai CTO di sebuah perusahaan namanya Bicarakan.id, terus saya juga organizer dari Flutter Indonesia, gitu. Teman-teman nanti kalau habis ini ada yang berminat nih, mau ngisi jadi speaker di Flutter Indonesia juga boleh, nanti di ini aja ya, di DM aja ke kita di Flutter IDN, kayaknya DM-nya mati, nanti saya aktifin ya setelah acara ini, kayak gitu. Oke, ini profil singkat saya, jadi ada GitHub saya. Nah, ini semua habis nanti saya ada nggak live code banget sih, tapi ada contoh kode repository kayak Derek tadi, bakal saya taruh juga di GitHub saya. Terus ada Medium dan Twitter. Pertama short intro ke Flutter dulu aja, harusnya udah pada tahu lah ya Flutter di tahap ini kayak gitu. Tapi kalau yang belum tahu, jadi Flutter ini adalah cross-platform framework. Flutter BTW baru keluar versi 3-nya, baru kemarin di Google I.O. Sekarang juga lagi banyak dibahas Flutter 3, jadi Flutter udah lumayan lama, kayaknya dari Desember 2018 itu, versi 1.0-nya, sampai sekarang udah versi 3.0, total udah ada banyak banget orang yang pakai Flutter, perusahaan yang pakai Flutter, kayak gitu. Kenapa menjadi fans Coach Justin ya? Backgroundnya bagus aja Coach Justin. Oke, jadi pertama saya akan bahas apa itu sebenarnya AWS Amplify gitu ya. Seperti tadi yang udah dibawain sama Derek. Jadi AWS Amplify ini adalah sebuah tools atau bisa dibilang mini framework mungkin ya, karena mereka bikin library yang cukup besar, di mana mereka itu bikin sebuah tools yang memudahkan kita sebagai app developer untuk bikin aplikasi yang lumayan kompleks, tapi jadinya cepat banget gitu teman-teman. Teman-teman kalau tadi perhatiin talknya Derek itu ada yang namanya AWS CLI atau CLI, nanti juga bakal saya kasih unjuk, itu cepat banget. Jadi pretty much kita nggak perlu ngoding sama sekali, tinggal nulis misalnya Amplify start gitu ya. Misalnya nih, nggak ada sebenarnya komen itu Amplify start, itu bakal langsung di-generate semua kodenya yang kita butuhin untuk connect ke internet, untuk ngehubungin ke database, tadi kan ada pertanyaan tentang database ya. Terus untuk misalnya bikin data, ngapus data, ngupdate data, segala macam, tanpa kita harus nulis kode sama sekali. Jadi canggih banget si AWS Amplify ini gitu. Nah, AWS Amplify ini nggak cuma ada di Flutter, tapi ada di aplikasi kayak React Native, terus ada di Android, di iOS, di Angular, di Vue.js juga ada. Jadi banyak banget framework yang udah disupport sama AWS Amplify ini, kayak gitu. Nah, produknya apa aja? Apa aja nih tools yang disupport sama Amplify biar mempercepat development kita gitu ya. Jadi pertama ada data store, authentication, UI library, terus hosting, file storage, dan lain-lain ke bawah gitu ya. Nah, yang akan kita bahas secara intensif hari ini cuma 2 aja sebenarnya, dan plus 1 sih nanti mungkin ya. Yang pertama itu data store, bakal kita kasih demonya hari ini, terus ada authentication juga, kayak gitu. Dan terakhir kita bakal bahas sedikit tentang UI library juga, karena cukup menarik. Nah, jadi pertama data store, seperti yang tadi udah dikasih unjuk sama si Derek ya, data store bahwa kita di sini tuh bisa pretty much ngedesain sistem yang kita mau, database yang kita mau, semuanya dari UI yang dibikin sama Amazon ya, dari websitenya Amazon. Kita bisa bikin tuh misalnya, oke, saya mau bikin website untuk e-commerce misalnya. Ada apa aja nih tabelnya? Misalnya ada ID pelanggan, terus ada ID produk, harga produk, segala macam, tinggal klik-klik aja. Tanpa kita harus ngoding sama sekali. Gitu. Nah, tapi gimana cara ngodingnya? Gimana cara hal tersebut bisa ujung-ujungnya jadi kode kayak gitu kan? Nah, itu yang jadi power dari si AWS Amplify ini. Karena, karena mereka punya satu hal yang namanya AWS Amplify CLI, yang mana kalau kita pakai si CLI ini, kita bisa tinggal jalanin satu kode, terus semua kodenya tuh langsung di-generate sama dia, kayak gitu. Jadi luar biasa cepat gitu. Kita nggak usah ngoding atau develop dari awal, ngoding manual satu-satu, tapi langsung bisa dengan klik-klik gini aja ya, klik ID, klik apa, oke ini maunya string, ini maunya boolean, segala macam, bisa langsung jadi gitu sistemnya. Tanpa kita perlu ngoding di database-nya, ngoding di misalnya Python atau PHP atau apa, semuanya langsung jadi kayak gitu. Nah, selanjutnya ada juga authentication yang cukup menarik. Nah, authentication ini sebenarnya sama kayak yang tadi. Kalau tadi kan API khusus untuk ngebaca data ya. Ngebaca, ngapus, ngebikin data, ngebuat data gitu ya. Nah, kalau si authentication ini khusus untuk autentikasi, teman-teman. Jadi, let's say misalnya kita mau bikin sistem untuk login, mau bikin sistem untuk misalnya register, lupa password, bahkan OTP untuk ngirim SMS, ngirim email, itu bisa langsung via si AWS Amplify Authentication ini, kayak gitu. Nah, di sini di dalamnya dia pakai ada satu service dari AWS yang namanya AWS Cognito untuk kayak nge-store atau nyimpen data-data dari user kita, kayak gitu. Jadi semuanya udah otomatis. Ini pun sama, kita nggak perlu ngoding sama sekali. Ngodingnya cuma sedikit aja. Misalnya harusnya kalau kita bikin sendiri itu service-nya let's say perlu 200 baris gitu atau 100 baris. Tapi di sini kita cuma perlu 1 sampai 2 baris aja. Ntar bakal saya demoin juga ini. Jadi ini salah satu fitur yang cukup powerful juga dari si AWS Amplify. Biar mempercepat kita dalam bikin sebuah produk mobile app gitu ya. Nah, selanjutnya ada juga UI library. Ini yang juga cukup magic sebenarnya. Saya baru tahu juga kemarin nih tentang si UI library-nya Amplify ini kayak gitu. Jadi UI library Amplify ini kita bisa tinggal copy aja teman-teman. Misalnya dikasih Figma gitu ya, atau desain Figma dari desainer kita, terus ada linknya kan. Linknya kita tinggal copy aja, terus ketika dipaste, ini bisa langsung translate sama AWS ke React gitu. Jadi website dalam bentuk React itu bisa langsung kayak magic gitu ya teman-teman. Kita tinggal copy link Figma-nya aja, dipaste ke Figma, terus sudah jadi semua kode JS-nya, CSS-nya segala macam. Jujur saya belum pernah nyoba ya, apakah ini kayak akurat 100% gitu ya desainnya dan segala macam. Cuma ini adalah salah satu at least udah jadi apa ya, udah ada dulu lah. Ntar kan bisa diimprove lambat laun ya sama si timnya AWS seperti itu. Oke, iya Mas Joshua dan Mas Fahron, nanti saya aktifin ya DM-nya. Bisa di follow dulu aja Flutter Indonesia, nanti saya yang DM. Gitu. Oke, lanjut ada file storage. Ini kalau teman-teman pernah pakai produknya AWS yang namanya S3 buat upload gitu ya, buat upload file, buat download file, buat host video segala macam. Itu kita bisa langsung connect ke aplikasi kita. Jadi misalnya kita let's say mau bikin aplikasi apa ya, misalnya upload KTP gitu ya, atau upload SIM, itu bisa langsung seperti tadi, kita tinggal jalanin komen via CLI-nya aja, misalnya mau upload, sediain tempat untuk upload foto atau upload PDF, itu bisa langsung via si AWS Amplify ini tanpa kita harus tulis kodenya satu-satu kayak gitu. Jadi canggih banget. Jadi di sini ada pilihan nih kalau teman-teman lihat, kalau orang udah sign in bisanya ngapain? Apa cuma upload atau bisa hapus juga atau bisa view juga gitu. Kalau misalnya guest atau belum login itu apakah bisa upload juga, bisa view juga, bisa delete juga gitu. Jadi semua aja terus langsung jadi gitu si sistemnya, dan nanti di aplikasinya pun bisa juga. Nah, selain itu ada seperti yang Direk tadi jelasin ya, ada banyak banget sebenarnya Amplify products yang belum semuanya sebenarnya tersedia di Flutter. Kayak contohnya ada hosting, di mana hosting itu kita bisa langsung, misalnya kita punya web app gitu ya, kita bisa langsung host di AWS-nya tanpa kita perlu deploy misalnya kan ngerti Linux atau ngerti Nginx, tapi ini langsung dengan cepat kayak gitu. Dan ada fitur-fitur lain kayak notifikasi, analytics, lambda functions, dan lain-lain. Nah, kita langsung aja ke inti dari materinya ya. Jadi kita akan membuat simple to-do list menggunakan AWS Amplify dan Flutter kayak gitu. Nah, caranya gimana? Ini aplikasinya saya mau kasih unjuk dulu sedikit. Jadi di sini kita bisa lihat ada sebuah aplikasi gitu ya, dengan ada login to your account, terus ada kolom atau tombol untuk masukin email dan password, terus di bawah kita bisa sign up, terus bisa login lagi dan lain-lain gitu ya. Kalau kita udah login, kalau kita udah login langsung berubah halamannya, yaitu kita bisa dapat tulis kayak gini ya, dan ini semuanya pretty much dikerjain ya sama si AWS Amplify-nya, karena saya ngodingnya sangat-sangat sedikit gitu. Misalnya untuk bikin ngirim ke API-nya, buat login-nya, buat sign up-nya, buat nanti ada verifikasi kode ke email juga, itu langsung otomatis. Contohnya misalnya ini saya mau bikin list to do baru, bisa to do 2 langsung connect gitu ya. Dan ini kayak yang Derek jelasin tadi udah offline first. Artinya kalau misalnya tiba-tiba internetnya mati, datanya nggak langsung hilang. Karena sama AWS tuh udah langsung di save gitu ya, datanya ke database lokal di device-nya. Jadi teman-teman nggak usah repot-repot lagi lah. Kalau teman-teman udah pernah ngoding aplikasi yang offline first, itu agak sulit sebenarnya kalau kita ngelakuin sendiri. Tapi sama si AWS Amplify ini semuanya langsung dilakuin secara otomatis kayak gitu. Dan ini bisa logout, habis itu misalnya saya coba register ya. Terus dia juga langsung bisa ngasih tahu misalnya passwordnya kurang kuat. Langsung dikasih tahu di sini, password did not conform with policy kayak gitu. Jadi passwordnya kurang kuat. Jadi semua itu bahkan udah langsung diurusin sama si AWS-nya. Yang menarik lagi, ini kita udah kirim verification code, ini langsung bisa dikirim via email sama AWS teman-teman. Jadi kalau kita lihat di sini, emailnya itu langsung, bentar ya, verification. Nah ini, dia langsung bisa ngirim kayak gini teman-teman, tanpa saya harus ngoding apa-apa sama sekali. Kalau teman-teman lihat di sini langsung ya, ada verification code, plus kita juga bisa nanti kalau mau ngirimnya itu ke SMS misalnya, jadi bentuknya OTP, tanpa kita harus ngoding apa-apa sama sekali teman-teman. Jadi semuanya langsung diurusin dari AWS si Amplify-nya kayak gitu. Jadi kita tinggal ya udah bener-bener bikin UI yang ini aja, terus ya udah selesai semuanya kayak gitu. Jadi cukup sangat-sangat canggih lah bisa dibilang si AWS Amplify ini kayak gitu. Oke, kita lanjut dulu ya. Teman-teman kalau ada pertanyaan boleh ditulis di kolom chat dulu, nanti kita bahas pas sudah sesinya selesai. Nggak terlalu panjang kok sesinya. Oke, jadi caranya gimana bisa bikin aplikasi tersebut dengan AWS Amplify? Ini pertama yang pretty much npm sama Flutter aja sih, udah cukup dua itu aja. npm untuk menginstall si CLI-nya, karena dia jalannya di atas npm kayak gitu, jadi harus diinstal dulu. Terus Flutter ya untuk bikin aplikasi Flutter-nya gitu ya. Nah, yang perlu dilakuin pertama, kayak yang tadi saya bilang, jadi install via npm install AWS Amplify CLI. Terus kita bisa ngejalanin command amplify configure. Nah, amplify configure ini nanti teman-teman bisa langsung ke login ke usernya teman-teman yang ada di AWS gitu. Jadi ntar saya coba ya. Kayaknya ini udah langsung connect ke akun saya tadi sih. Saya soalnya udah amplify configure. Ini kayaknya udah connect ke akun saya. Nanti dia bakal langsung ngebuka web browser gitu ya. Nih kayak gini. Terus langsung udah connect. Dia nyari apakah ini orang udah pernah login atau belum ke AWS. Kalau udah pernah login, ya udah diambil credentials-nya dalam arti nanti bakal dikonekin nih ke, nah ini di sini. Dikonekin lewat si CLI-nya ini. Jadi CLI-nya ini canggih banget sih kalau menurut saya teman-teman. Gitu. Nah, kalau udah jalan Amplify configure, setelah selesai nanti teman-teman berarti udah connected nih komputernya teman-teman, mesinnya teman-teman dengan AWS Amplify gitu ya. Jadi udah ada credentials-nya. Nah, gimana cara bisa connect-nya? Nanti kalau teman-teman ikutin si step-nya Amplify configure tadi, teman-teman bakal bikin user, ada namanya di AWS itu istilahnya IAM. Jadi istilahnya kayak user di dalam user gitu ya. Jadi sub user-nya teman-teman, di mana nanti teman-teman itu harus generate access key ID sama secret key. Nah, access key ID sama secret key ini nanti bentuknya yang hash gitu ya. Jadi kayak kata-kata unik aja yang dipakai untuk ngebuktiin ke AWS bahwa komputer ini udah tervalidasi untuk connect ke akun saya. Kayak gitu. Jadi nanti dengan key ini kita udah bisa tuh connect misalnya mau tadi jalanin si CLI-nya, mau bikin project buat di Flutter-nya dan lain-lain. Terus yang perlu dilakukan, kita harus tambahin dua library ini, Amplify Flutter sama Data Store ke Flutter project-nya. Jadi di sini udah saya tambahin ya. Kalau teman-teman bisa lihat ada di pub spec-nya, Amplify Flutter, terus Amplify Core sama Data Store. Jadi ini untuk bisa nyimpen data gitu ya di dalam si AWS Amplify-nya. Terus sama platform iOS-nya perlu dinaikin versinya, tapi ini default-nya sih kalau Flutter zaman sekarang udah gitu. Terus teman-teman bisa ngejalanin sandbox.amplify app. Ini kayak yang tadi Derek jalanin, sangat-sangat praktis ya. Jadi ketika kita buka, kita bisa kelihatan gitu ya UI yang kayak tadi Derek kasih lihat. Jadi kita bisa desain misalnya database kita mau seperti apa, sistemnya mau seperti apa, kayak gitu. Kalau yang saya ambil di contoh ini kayaknya agak lupa. Yang saya ambil di contoh ini itu langsung aja template-nya, yaitu to-do list. Kayak gitu. Jadi to-do list simple aja, jadi ada ID dari to-do list-nya, terus misalnya ID dari to-do list-nya itu, bentar, kita coba restart dulu. ID dari to-do list-nya misalnya 1, 2, 3 gitu ya. Kita coba. ID dari to-do list-nya misalnya ini 1, terus ini 2, ini 3, kayak gitu. Terus ada title yang atas, title yang bawah body misalnya. Terus ada apakah si to-do list-nya udah komplit atau belum, kayak gitu ya. Nah, kalau udah kita bisa jalanin komen ini teman-teman, amplify pull, terus sandbox ID-nya berapa. Nah, ini nanti kita jalanin di Flutter project kita. Misalnya folder project kita di sini ya, Flutter Amplify. Kita jalanin aja terminal dari sini. Terus jalanin amplify pull. Nah, dari sini nanti secara otomatis si amplify-nya itu bakal narik konfigurasi. Apa yang barusan nih tadi kita buat si sistemnya. Misalnya tadi ada to-do list, atau misalnya ada produk, atau ada user, atau ada apa, secara otomatis tuh kodenya langsung dibikinin, langsung di-generate sama mereka. Jadi tanpa kita harus ngoding dari awal lagi, kayak gitu. Terus kalau udah, berarti sampai sini project kita udah ke connect sama si Amplify, kayak gitu. Jadi Amplify-nya tadi berdasarkan blueprint atau sistem desain yang kita buat ya, misalnya ada to-do list, ada produk, ada apa segala macam, itu udah ke deploy. Di AWS-nya kita tinggal connect-in ke aplikasi kita. Caranya gimana? Tinggal panggil ini, gampang banget. Amplify.add plugin, terus fitur yang mau kita pakai apa aja. Kayak gitu. Misalnya sekarang fiturnya kan tadi ada banyak ya. Ada notifikasi, ada analytics segala macam. Misalnya mau kita pakai sekarang cuma data store, ya udah tulis aja Amplify data store kayak gitu. Nah, model provider ini kodenya, kode yang ada di sini ya, ini kode yang ini nih. Ini semua udah langsung di-generate sama si Amplify. Nih, kode yang ini kan agak banyak nih. Jadi misalnya atributnya ada apa aja segala macam itu udah langsung di-generate sama si AWS Amplify-nya. Tanpa kita perlu repot-repot coding dari awal gitu ya. Terus terakhir kita tinggal panggil aja amplify.configure. Amplify config ini juga kode hasil generate dari Amplify CLI. Nah, setelah ini udah connect sebenarnya. Aplikasi kita seperti ini gitu ya. Udah connect, ini kan udah terkoneksi dengan koneksi dari AWS Amplify-nya itu dengan database yang terdeploy di sana. Kita tinggal bikin aja kode untuk ngebuat atau create gitu ya. Update, delete, sama read buat ngebaca, ngapus segala macem. Dan kodenya pun sangat singkat gitu ya. Bisa dilihat cuma amplify.datastore.save. Terus modelnya ini kan udah dibuatin, udah di-generate sama si Amplify CLI. Jadi kita tinggal langsung pakai aja. Nge-save pun sama, delete pun sama, dan query pun sama. Dan saya ingetin lagi, ini nanti fiturnya udah langsung aktif offline first. Jadi artinya misalnya di tengah-tengah gini, koneksinya hilang gitu ya, itu datanya tetap tersimpan di local database-nya si sistem kayak gitu. Jadi kita nggak perlu bikin sistem untuk offline first-nya lagi. Nah, kalau mungkin misalnya kita, ini terakhir ya, kalau misalnya terakhir kita mau ngedengerin perubahannya terus, jadi misalnya di sini, kalau ada perubahan, let's say kan ini sistemnya bisa, aplikasinya bisa dipakai sama 2 orang atau 3 orang gitu ya, misalnya yang ngubah bukan dari HP ini, yang ngubah dari HP tempat lain, itu kita bisa juga lakuin teman-teman. Tinggal panggil aja amplify.datastore.observe query. Terus model yang mau kita atau objek yang mau kita lihat perubahan datanya tuh apa aja. Kalau di sini contohnya to do kan nama kelasnya. Terus sudah tiap ada perubahan langsung kita dapat notifikasi gitu ya, dapat perubahannya. Perubahannya apa, kita ambil lagi datanya. Perubahannya apa, kita ambil lagi datanya kayak gitu. Jadi kodenya sangat-sangat sedikit kalau tadi teman-teman perhatiin ya. Dan udah bisa ngejalanin aplikasi basic ya sebenarnya. Create, read, update, delete kayak gitu dengan semua interface semuanya ada di AWS-nya itu. AWS-nya itu. Nah, selanjutnya kita udah berhasil kan ngejalanin ini. Yang kita mau lakuin habis ini adalah gimana caranya kita bisa connect ke autentikasinya. Jadi orang harus login dulu sebelum pakai aplikasi kita. Jadi ini kan kita logout misalnya. Jadi misalnya kita buka aplikasinya, kalau belum login dia bakal ngasih unjuk halaman email sama password ini kayak gitu. Caranya gimana? Pertama, teman-teman harus buka di project-projectnya teman-teman di foldernya Amplify add out. Jadi di sini nanti teman-teman mau nambahin satu fitur nih di AWS Amplify-nya. Tadi kan kita baru punya satu aja yang sebelumnya data store. Sekarang mau kita tambah lagi out. Nanti kalau teman-teman mau nambah lagi fitur yang lain ya tinggal jalanin command yang sama aja. Amplify add analytics, amplify add apa kayak gitu. Terus kalau udah amplify add out, out kan cukup basic ya. Biasanya cuma ada misalnya login pakai email, login pakai nomor telepon dan segala macam. Tinggal panggil amplify.push, amplify spasi push, sorry. Nah selanjutnya teman-teman bisa nambahin library-nya amplify out cognito. Seperti ini, udah ditambahin juga sama saya di sini. Out cognito untuk autentikasinya. Terus tadi kan kita punya add plugin ya, fungsi amplify.add plugin. Tadi baru ada si data store aja. Sekarang gampang banget teman-teman, kita tinggal tambahin aja satu lagi, amplify out cognito. Teman-teman bisa lihat di Sini. Sorry. Nih, add plugins. Tadi kan kita ada data store. Kita tambahin out plugin kayak gitu. Misalnya ini ada API, ini ada tambahan, nanti tinggal ditambahin lagi ke sini. Kalau mau nambahin yang lain, misalnya analytics, tinggal tambahin aja di sini analytics plugin kayak gitu. Jadi sangat-sangat simple untuk bisa konekin si fitur-fitur AWS Amplify ini ke aplikasi Flutter teman-teman. Jadi kodenya akan sangat sedikit yang teman-teman harus tulis gitu ya, karena semuanya udah di generate sama si Amplify ini gitu. Nah selanjutnya teman-teman juga bisa, tadi kan saya bahas tentang UI library ya, UI library di mana UI library-nya AWS Amplify itu bisa konekin antara Figma, jadi kita tinggal kasih link Figma terus langsung dibuatin kode React-nya secara otomatis kayak gitu ya. Nah kalau di Flutter ini teman-teman juga bisa, ada pakai library namanya Authenticator di AWS Amplify, di mana teman-teman tuh bisa langsung bikin UI kayak gini tanpa ngoding sama sekali. Kalau ini kan tadi saya masih ngoding UI-nya, bikin text field-nya, bikin button-nya, cari warnanya, kayak gitu-gitu. Nah, kalau pakai Authenticator ini, teman-teman tinggal panggil aja. Misalnya login page, gitu. Login page-nya udah jadi, register page-nya udah jadi. Gitu. Jadi, lebih advance lagi, lebih memudahkan kita lagi. Jadi, kita bahkan nggak usah ngoding UI-nya sama sekali. Gitu. Tapi ini saya nggak pakai, yang saya pakai adalah cuma fungsi dari autentikasinya aja gitu ya. Pertama, kita bisa ngedengerin, setelah tadi kan udah connect ya ke Amplify out-nya si AWS, kita tinggal panggil amplify.out.streamcontroller.listen. Di mana di sini nanti bakal kita dengerin semua perubahan tentang autentikasi. Misalnya ada user baru, atau misalnya usernya lagi logout, atau ada orang sign up, dan segala macam. Perubahannya tuh bakal selalu kepanggil di blok kode yang ini kayak gitu. Nanti di sini kita bisa panggil, oh, oke, sekarang orangnya lagi login atau logout. Sekarang yang login siapa? Angga atau misalnya Derek gitu. Jadi ntar bisa ketahuan di kode Flutter-nya secara otomatis. Jadi kodenya cuma berapa baris nih? 5-6 baris mungkin ya, kayak gitu. Terus selanjutnya kita bisa sign up. Sign up-nya pun sangat cepat gitu ya. Jadi ini bisa tinggal kita tulis aja mau sign up-nya pakai apa. Misalnya ini, email sama nama, terus bawahnya pakai password misalnya gitu ya. Nah, ketika kita sign up, secara otomatis si Cognito ini, AWS Cognito, nandain si akun kita sebagai emailnya unconfirmed. Artinya emailnya udah masuk ke register tapi belum dikonfirmasi. Lalu akan dikirim nih teman-teman si email yang tadi saya tunjukin di sini secara otomatis gitu ya, tanpa kita, ini saya nggak ngoding apa-apa sama sekali. Dia langsung ngirim verification email ini dengan verification code, dia yang generate sendiri, semuanya out of the box gitu. Jadi kita nggak perlu misalnya nyari kode yang uniknya lagi, nulis kata-katanya seperti apa, tapi semuanya langsung di-generate sama dia. Gitu. Sorry. Oke, ini sign up-nya. Terus kalau mau verifikasi juga gampang banget. Tinggal panggil amplify.auth.confirm sign up. Langsung udah ke sign up si akun kita dengan verifikasi kode yang tadi masuk di email gitu ya. Terus terakhir kalau mau sign in pun dengan gampang banget. Tinggal panggil amplify.auth.signin. Masukin emailnya, passwordnya, udah beres. Jadi bahkan nggak usah ngoding apa-apa sama sekali ya. Paling cuma UI-nya aja sedikit karena semua dari perubahan siapa yang login itu udah masuk, logout juga udah ada, sign up, bahkan ngirim email itu udah diurusin semua sama si AWS Amplify ini kayak gitu. Nah ini hasil codingan yang tadi kita bahas gitu ya. Jadi dari login, sign up, verifikasi code, terus mau bikin to-do list baru, ngedit, dan lain-lain itu udah kodenya paling cuma perlu berapa baris gitu ya, sedikit banget dengan Amplify ini. Teman-teman bisa lihat Flutter Amplify sample, kodenya ada di situ. Kalau teman-teman mau lihat, mau coba sendiri boleh di lokal machine-nya teman-teman. Nah, selanjutnya pros and cons ini bakal saya bahas. Apa sih kelebihan dan kekurangannya pakai AWS Amplify? Pertama, AWS itu sebagai bisnis yang sebelum ada Amplify gitu ya, sebenarnya fungsinya udah banyak, fiturnya udah banyak banget sebelum itu. Saya pun pakai di kantor gitu, udah bertahun-tahun pakai AWS di kantor. Karena emang fiturnya lumayan banyak gitu. Nah, fitur yang banyak ini yang udah ada sebelum ada Amplify, itu kita bisa tinggal pakai. Kita tinggal colok aja gitu ya ke Amplify kita. Jadi semuanya bisa terintegrasi di satu tempat. Nah, yang kedua, CLI-nya sih menurut saya yang juara banget, yang bagus banget, karena CLI-nya ini cuma perlu 1 kode, 2 kode untuk orang-orang yang masih awam, orang-orang yang masih baru coding, sangat-sangat memudahkan sih. Sangat-sangat memudahkan orang-orang yang baru mau belajar coding, jadi nggak takut gitu ya bikin aplikasi. Kayak tadi kan sebenarnya kelihatan lumayan kompleks gitu ya, tapi sangat-sangat gampang dengan CLI-nya gitu. Terus ini kode yang di-generate secara otomatis dari CLI-nya itu sangat-sangat memudahkan development, dan UI library-nya juga fiturnya lumayan banyak kalau mau kita coba-coba gitu. Apalagi kalau teman-teman bikin website pakai React gitu, itu lumayan banyak juga. Nah, paling kekurangannya AWS Amplify, konsolnya atau studionya itu ada di sini, ada AWS Amplify Studio namanya. Nah, itu kalau menurut saya ini nih, Amplify Studio. Kalau menurut saya UI-nya kurang apa ya, kurang user friendly lah. Jadi kalau kita misalnya coba pakai ini, terus nih Amplify itu sampel, kita coba buka studionya ya. Kalau kita pakai ini, mungkin perlu beberapa hari lah buat belajar si UI-nya ini apakah cukup bagus atau enggak gitu ya. Atau misalnya kita masih bingung-bingung, perlu nanya sama si expert yang di Amplify, mungkin tanya direct tadi kayak gitu-gitu. Itu kekurangannya di situ sih mungkin kalau saya bisa bilang ya. Oke, selanjutnya kita bisa kemana? Habis dari sini gitu ya, udah tahu Amplify itu apa, cara pakainya seperti apa, CLI-nya itu seperti apa di Flutter juga. Selanjutnya kita bisa pertama clone repository yang tadi saya buat tuh, terus teman-teman coba aja sendiri dengan akunnya teman-teman sendiri, karena sangat-sangat mudah ya. Komennya paling kayaknya nggak sampai 20 deh, mungkin 15 gitu ya. Yang perlu teman-teman jalanin, kodenya pun nggak banyak. Jadi teman-teman bisa clone repositorinya terus coba aja dengan apa namanya mesin teman-teman sendiri, coba bikin aplikasi yang teman-teman mau. Misalnya tadi saya bikin to-do list, misalnya teman-teman bikin tadi ya kayak yang Derek bikin list belanjaan, atau misalnya mau bikin aplikasi e-commerce kayak gitu. Even e-commerce pun sebenarnya masih bisa dibuat menggunakan si AWS Amplify ini. Jadi teman-teman harus banyak explore kayak gitu. Terus yang kedua, coba lagi fitur AWS Amplify yang tadi belum saya jelasin. Masih banyak banget fitur-fitur yang belum saya jelasin. Terus yang ketiga, coba explore AWS produk yang lain dan integrate ke Amplify. Jadi di-connectin ke Amplify. Contohnya yang bisa itu misalnya S3. Buat S3 itu teman-teman buat upload. Jadi kalau kita mau upload file yang gede-gede atau filenya banyak banget yang mau di-upload gitu, let's say 1 juta file, 1 juta image mau kita upload, biasanya S3 itu jadi pilihan kayak gitu, biar kita uploadnya reliable, sistemnya nggak gampang down dan lain-lain. Itu bisa dengan mudah. Jadi aplikasinya teman-teman mau ngupload file tuh dengan gampang pakai S3 dan AWS Amplify kayak gitu. Oke, ini resourcesnya. Nanti saya coba tanya Derek ya, slide yang tadi dan slide yang ini harusnya bisa kita share sih ke teman-teman, biar teman-teman bisa kalau mau belajarnya offline itu bisa habis ini. Gitu. Oke, selesai presentasi dari saya. Terima kasih, selamat malam. Kita lanjut ke sesi tanya jawab ya, teman-teman. Kalau ada pertanyaan tentang AWS, tentang Flutter, atau tentang software engineering secara umum, boleh banget ditanyain ya. Oke, udah punya 2 pertanyaan kita. Boleh kita ini yang pertama dulu ya. Ya, jadi sama aja kayak kesimpan di local storage gitu ya. Iya, betul. Jadi teman-teman sebenarnya bisa ngelihat kodenya si AWS Amplify ini. Kodenya open source kayak tadi Derek bilang. Jadi kode Flutter-nya tuh ada sebenarnya di GitHub-nya si AWS. Jadi teman-teman mau lihat gimana sebenarnya mereka bikin si offline verse-nya di dalam gitu ya. Inside the box itu seperti apa. Teman-teman bisa lihat. Jadi mereka bisa pakai shared preferences, bisa pakai database. Kemungkinan pakai database sih. Karena shared preferences kayaknya buat data seperti tadi agak terlalu banyak gitu. Jadi mungkin mereka bikin database di dalamnya, terus di dalamnya itu kalau tiap kali ada perubahan mereka ganti nilai di database-nya itu bisa. Teman-teman bisa explore di kodenya. Di kodenya si AWS Amplify gitu, biar teman-teman tahu juga gimana cara kerjanya. Oke, selanjutnya pertanyaan dari Mas Joshua. Mudah di custom untuk aplikasi besar yang butuh API kompleks nggak, Mas? Ya, untuk di custom dengan API aplikasi besar gitu ya, dengan API yang cukup kompleks, sebenarnya saya nggak bisa bilang mana yang mudah atau enggak gitu ya. Karena saya juga belum pernah coba untuk aplikasi yang sangat besar sebenarnya buat Amplify ini. Kayak gitu. Tapi yang saya tahu, saya tadi sempat ngobrol-ngobrol juga sama Derek, katanya adalah ada aplikasi-aplikasi yang cukup besar dan mereka tuh sebelumnya punya database sendiri atau sistem sendiri gitu ya. Misalnya backend-nya pakai Laravel misalnya, atau pakai CI atau pakai apa gitu ya. Atau pakai Django atau pakai Go. Nah, dari situ sebenarnya bisa ada beberapa fungsi-fungsi yang bisa kita konekin. Misalnya menggunakan ada yang namanya Lambda Functions. Lambda Functions itu buat teman-teman yang belum tahu, di Amplify ada juga. Itu jadi kita bisa ngejalanin fungsi yang nggak berjalan di database atau bukan database, yang nggak berjalan di API service manapun gitu. Jadi dia berjalan sendiri aja. Cuma satu fungsi doang, jadi sekali jalan. Misalnya kita mau jalanin fungsi ini buat apa? Misalnya buat narik data gitu ya, let's say. Jadi saya mau narik data dari server iktp misalnya gitu ya. Saya mau narik data dari server iktp kalau misalnya hari ini tanggal 20 gitu. Itu bisa saya jalanin menggunakan si fitur Lambda Functions itu. Jadi Lambda Functions ntar tinggal dipanggil aja misalnya sama mobile atau sama website gitu ya. Habis dipanggil, nanti dia bisa ngubah data di misalnya database kita, database di backend kita yang pakai backend sendiri gitu ya. Atau mengubah data langsung di database-nya si AWS bisa juga gitu. Jadi sangat interconnected lah kayak gitu. Mas Joshua, terima kasih. Oke, pertanyaan selanjutnya dari Mas Jimmy, pendapat Amplify versus Firebase, pros and cons-nya. Ya, jadi pros-nya kalau menurut saya Firebase tentu lebih dulu ya sebenarnya, udah lebih mature dibanding Amplify. Terus Firebase itu lebih connected sama produknya Google, karena kan Firebase punya Google ya, sedangkan Amplify punyanya Amazon kayak gitu. Jadi kalau misalnya kita Firebase itu buat notifikasi, itu semua orang udah pakai gitu kan. Semua developer lah, hampir semua developer itu yang bikin mobile app itu udah pakai Firebase. Sedangkan Amplify ini ya karena baru, jadi belum terlalu banyak. Itu mungkin ya pros dari si Firebase dibanding Amplify. Cuma kalau sebaliknya, prosnya si Amplify dibanding Firebase, kalau saya bilang untuk produk-produk yang berhubungan dengan backend, berhubungan dengan website, itu AWS lebih familiar lah buat orang-orang backend dan website itu dibanding produknya Google. Walaupun Google juga sekarang lumayan banyak yang bikin familiar gitu ya. Jadi kalau kita mau bikin koneksi misalnya tadi tuh mau upload data, itu lebih gampang di Amplify dikonekin ke S3. Karena dari Firebase setahu saya belum banyak sih. Atau belum ada malahan ya kayaknya solusi atau produk yang bisa kita pakai untuk tadi buat upload file, misalnya ada let's say 1.000 orang per hari yang mau upload file ke server kita menggunakan Firebase gitu. Di Firebase mungkin ada tapi belum ada yang sebagus S3 misalnya kayak gitu. Dan ada beberapa fitur-fitur lain juga di AWS yang lebih bagus dan lebih familiar lah buat orang backend dan buat orang website kayak gitu. Jadi ya ada pros ada cons-nya. Kalau saran saya sih sebagai developer netral gitu ya, nggak mau mihak salah satu pihak, lebih baik ya udah kalau kita cari yang bagusnya aja. Kalau ada satu part yang lebih bagus di Firebase ya pakailah Firebase. Kalau ada satu part yang lebih bagus di Amplify ya pakailah Amplify kayak gitu. Karena kalau pakai kita sebagai developer ya semakin banyak kosakatanya juga gitu. Jadi kita tahu, oh gue tahu cara pakai AWS, tahu cara pakai Google Cloud, tahu cara pakai Amplify, tahu cara pakai Firebase. Itu makin banyak, kita juga sebagai developer nilainya makin naik kan, makin tinggi. Jadi kita bisa adaptasi. Kalau misalnya perusahaan kita tiba-tiba berubah dari Amazon ke Google Cloud, ya nggak apa-apa. Oh gue ngerti dua-duanya kok, kayak gitu. Gitu sih teman-teman. Ntar saya mau oh teman-teman, Mas Fahron dan Mas Joshua, kalau masih belum bisa kirim DM ke Twitter, bisa kirim email aja ya ke sini, flutter.id.official@gmail.com. Kasih aja misalnya namanya siapa, terus sama emailnya apa gitu. Emailnya apa sebenarnya udah ada sih di situ ya, di pas nge-reply. Oke, teman-teman, mungkin ada pertanyaan lagi terakhir sebelum kita tutup. Terima kasih banyak BTW teman-teman yang udah hadir di malam ini. Mungkin lagi pada nonton Thomas Cup, pada nonton Google I.O. juga ya, tapi ada masih pada stay di sini. Thank you banget. Oke, kayaknya nggak ada lagi ya. Oke, kalau nggak ada lagi, bisa kita tutup sesi hari ini, teman-teman. Terima kasih banyak yang sudah datang, sudah hadir. Terima kasih banyak yang sudah nanya. Semoga kita semua sehat selalu dan semakin senang lah explore soal Flutter, soal software engineering, dan semangat semuanya. Selamat malam. Bye.